Oh,
Hi.
live.
Hello, we're live. Hi, this is Meg Riley, sitting here today in Maynard, Massachusetts, in the kitchen of my friend Judith Frediani, and delighted to welcome you to another hour of The VUU. We'll introduce our special guests in just a moment, but first I invite the regulars to say hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, I'm Patrice Curtis from Washington, D.C., where it's gray and cloudy.
Oh, and I'm Hank Person. I'm just down the road from Meg in Medford, Mass.
And I'm Tom Shade in beautiful, sunny, but cold Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a sunny day here for the first time in like weeks.
And I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, Washington, where it's cold and rainy. And Meg, please say hello to Judith and tell her I miss her.
I will, except she's in New Hampshire, but I'll see her eventually. I will do that. And you can see half of...
Wait, does Judith know that you're at her house? You didn't like break in or something like that.
Don't tell her, all right? She's not here. Now, she lets me come here and get over jet lag, and I'm just back from Europe and pretty much not very much fun. So she's very kind to me and just lets me go to bed. So I wanted to welcome Shauna Foster, our tech person. You can see part of her there. Shauna, can you lean over and wave?
Hi, everybody. I am more than just a shoulder. I'm coming back for the VUU today, and I'm in Denver with one of our guests.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce him since you're sitting next to him?
Well, I think I'll let him introduce himself.
Well, hey, y'all. My name's Kenny Wiley, and I'm a director of religious education in the Denver area. And it is awesomely sunny here. But early, West Coast, West. Yeah.
I bet Aisha doesn't have much sympathy for you, though, because you're an hour later than she is.
That's probably
Welcome to my world.
And our other special guest, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I'm Barbara Gadon. I'm lead minister at Elliott Chapel in Kirkwood, Missouri.
Fabulous.
And it's lovely here, gorgeous, crisp, sunny morning.
Excellent. Well, we're really delighted to have special guests today to talk about what's going on locally in the St. Louis-Ferguson area and also how that is moving into organized national movement that Unitarian Universalists are getting involved with, as well as hopefully following the strong leadership of the people on the ground who have been doing this work for a long time. So, Barbara, let's start with you. What's it like now in the St. Louis area? I know you guys have been having vigils every week ever since the shooting. Can you describe what's going on with your folks?
Sure. This has been really an amazing time for us. Elliott Chapel has not really been what I would call an activist church by any stretch, and this has really helped bring people out of their shells. I was really concerned about the silence just the week of the shooting, and it was the whole nation is glued to this event, and in Kirkwood it's Tralala, Mayberry, and we couldn't stand it. So we had a candlelight community vigil, and then for the wider town, and then we've had these. Was our 11th one this last week, and every week I try to be mature about the possibility that there will be fewer people, and I get ready, and last night or Tuesday night there were 40 people. So and other churches are coming. So there's a sense of coming together. Ferguson October really meant a lot to people. It brought a lot of groups out. And right now we're getting ready for the grand jury announcement, which is something that I'm working with different groups of people to prepare for in different ways, different levels.
Okay, so you skimmed right through Ferguson October. Can you say a little bit more?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that. Yes, that we had the 4 close-in metro churches had a rally on Friday night, and all participated in that. And then we had a really nice force of yellow out on the big march in downtown St. Louis. There were people that marched, and there were about 60 UUs there in a crowd of, they never estimate these crowds well. So some played, Post-Dispatch said 3,000, some people said 7,000, we don't know. But huge, and then some people marched in Clayton for the county prosecutor's office, and then on Monday, I was out with Teresa Cooley for the Moral Monday March, and in the squall. This is what, and it was a really, I don't know how to even describe it. I have never done civil disobedience before. I'd never considered it. And this really spoke to my heart, and it really helped to have Teresa there next to me for courage and to stand up and do it. And it was powerful. It was I really felt like I was with a group of people from all different religions and races, and Muslim, Jewish, Christian, UU. And and watching Cornel West in that, I just really admired him, and excited that he's coming to GA as the Ware lecturer. So that was, and then it's been disheartening to see. Okay, so then right after we have this huge outpouring of support, and then suddenly there's this leakage of new evidence that is, I think, preparing us for a grand jury decision. So we're working hard not to let that cancel out all of the really, really good stuff that's starting to form.
Hank is asking questions, but I'll verbalize them. I was just talking to someone recently who said, "What does St. Louis have to do with Ferguson?" I said, "Ferguson's a suburb of St. Louis." They said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And so I'm wondering how connected St. Louis feels to Ferguson. How far is Kirkwood geographically from Ferguson, and also how far is it mentally from Ferguson?
Oh, very, very excellent question, because it's. I actually looked it up on Google Maps just to say, okay, our two towns is 18 miles, really, 18 miles from Kirkwood to there, and it could be a million miles.
No. It's
We've got a little noise coming here.
That's Hank. He just muted himself. Go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thanks, Hank. So anyway, so emotionally, it can feel a million miles away, and it's been one of the reasons why it's been really important to have the vigils, because it's really like next news cycle for a lot of people, and I'm seeing really a big difference between when I talk to a group of or any African Americans that live here and the white people here, there's no need to kind of say, well, let's keep Ferguson in our thoughts and everything with the black folks, because that's just so big on the horizon. And for the communities that are more, it's just a really interesting visual for people to drive by us and see a big signs that say Black Lives Matter and white faces, for the most part, white faces above them. It just does a little disconnect for folks, and we're glad for that.
So you stand outside the church,
yeah,
for an hour on Tuesday night with this, and
yeah,
I've been to Kirkwood, and it's not a remote place. It's on a real street.
Yeah, it's right in the middle of town, and that was one of the reasons when I came to Elliott, I thought, well, this is just, it's so good to, as a kind of a public square kind of thing, because we're really in the middle of that little town anyway, and a lot of people, and I've been surprised by the positive responses that we've had to people driving by. Most people will honk, wave, thumbs up, thank you, and there's a few people that are doing they're resolutely turning their heads, and I've been told we've been given the finger, and I've managed to not give the finger back. But
there you go. That's that seminary training, right?
Seminary training, right?
So,
But mostly very positive.
So Barbara, when you were just talking, I just got goosebumps on my body because at All Souls Church we're doing a lot of work around voter rights, and we just saw this wonderful documentary last night called Freedom Summer, where 1,000 students went down to Mississippi to try to get Black folks registered there. And I was thinking, as you were saying, standing holding that sign with all of your faces, I was just thinking about how risky it is for white folks also to stand up publicly against the dominant view. So that's really great. I also had a follow-on question. I was wondering how connected you are to either Black churches in Ferguson or Black churches in St. Louis. I mean, how's the coalition building working?
It's slow. It's slower than I would like it to be, and we are really working to follow the lead and not be, we know what to do, etc. And so there are a couple of African American churches in Kirkwood that the ministers are working with the other ministers that normally, I haven't seen these two together at meetings, and we're starting to see that. We're planning a community vigil for the day of the grand jury announcement, and we're getting those Black and white churches to formulate that together rather than just have it be the Elliott people show. And the other thing I'm really excited about is something we just found out about the other day, which is there's been a 3 evenings so far of women coming. It's called this event called Mother to Mother, and so it's Black women talking in kind of a semicircle in front of an audience about the talk the Black families have with their kids and about police, and our church is invited, opening it up to people of all races to hear that and be a part of that conversation. And the people that are organizing it, 2 of them are Tracy Blackman and Karen Anderson, who are, I'm their screaming fangirl in terms of their work here. They just have been so wonderful. And that they're coming to my church is just more exciting than I can tell you.
Well, Barbara, thanks for stepping up. I think for those of us who are white, safety is such a presumed thing that we walk around with, that to speak out against police brutality gives us a tiny feeling of what it's like to walk around any time as a person of color, especially young African American men. I want to switch to our other guest, Kenny Wiley. Kenny, you sent out a blog post. Well, you wrote a blog post that then I think Peter Morales discovered and sent out. Tell us the story of how your blog post went viral and what's happened with that. And
Well, first, Meg, I think it's interesting that viral is an interesting term in Unitarian Universalism that I think
tiny virus.
I think it has like 6,000 reads, 6,500, and it feels like every use Reddit. So, which is
kind of like the Ebola epidemic in the United States.
Can I just say?
That's really a good analogy, Tom.
Can I just say I'm happy to say that we do have a few more than 6,500 people.
Yes, I'm aware.
Not too many more.
Right. Yeah. But so I've been working in Denver for about a year, and kind of keeping my head down and focusing on my church. And when Mike Brown was killed, in Missouri, and I went to the University of Missouri, I just felt so moved to get involved. And so I've been planning rallies here with some UUs, but mostly other people through social media. And so the blog post was called "Who Are My People?" And it's a question that's been on my mind because most UUs are white, and I grew up UU. I feel like UUs are my people, but sometimes there'll be things, microaggressions, things that'll happen that suggest otherwise. And as I've been organizing and working with, I have this interesting place as a black religious leader from a white denomination, and so I get sort of maybe more access. That I'm invited to, I'm now invited to Black Caucus events and stuff like that in Denver, and they think it's cool that I'm UU, and I just felt like there's this sort of duality where, on the one hand, I work with white, and I don't work with any black kids at my church, but I'm still a black man in my 20s, and this is a reality for me. However I sound, my parents are up. I grew up with 2 parents and all that, but in the wrong situation, none of that matters. And I just wrote that because I wanted to feel like my people, in this case, talking about UUs, are with me, and I haven't felt that to the full extent. So that's kind of how that piece developed, and the response has been pretty impressive. I've heard from people all over the country, moved in some way or another, not always good, but that's okay. So,
Kenny, this is Aisha. You were lifted up very publicly at Loretta. Janice Marie Johnson from the Office of Multicultural Growth and Witness read a piece from your blog, and I understand she contacted you to let you know she was going to do that, and everybody was moved. And I think for religious educators of color in the room, we all kind of had a knowing. We actually went out to breakfast together one of the mornings, and being together is a different experience when we don't have people from the dominant culture. So one of the things I'm getting at is we tend to be louder, and I know I'm being a little generalizing, but what happened at Loretta was I was at a luncheon, and we were asked, it was actually an endowment fund luncheon, and we were asked to share stories, and so we were all at tables of 10. I shared a story, and I was boisterous, because I am, especially when I'm invited to be, and I thought we were all loud, and a person came to me, made a beeline for me, and said, "Oh, I'm about to speak, so please quiet down." And I couldn't hide my reaction, and I literally just was dumbfounded, because I'm like, A, we were invited to speak, B, what? Why am I the one that you came to? So actually other people in the room saw it, and so I did talk to her after, and I knew she was going to feel terrible, and I knew she didn't intend to hurt my feelings, but I said, really, my question to myself was, what in my behavior indicated at any point during the Laredo Fall Conference that when someone gets up to a microphone, I just don't stop talking, or I start jumping up and misbehaving? And clearly that wasn't the case. So it felt very, who are my people? I ask myself that every now and then. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I have a long list of things that have happened, and I love the faith, and I love being a UU. It's given me not just the theology to get through some tough times, but also the people to help me get through. And but I'll tell you, sometimes some weird stuff will happen. I'll just be in church, and I'll bring a friend who's black, and some folks in the congregation will come up and start telling my friend about how they marched with Dr. King, and it's like, cool, fantastic. But what does that have to do with anything, right? And so it gets weird sometimes. It really does. But I think it's everybody's responsibility to talk about those things, and I share those experiences. I saw Meg do the face palm, but it's I think when we know that these things happen, these microaggressions happen, it helps us on the way. And I wrote that piece because I wanted to share my experience, that it's not like, okay, I'm out, forget this, but it's frustrating. And sometimes we're just talking about, hey, can I touch your hair? But sometimes we're talking about, like, hey, I need you to come to this rally. I need you to show up, because people who look like me are being profiled and abused and sometimes murdered. And, I'm with you at church every Sunday or virtually or whatever. Can you be with me? So I think what we're talking about is really serious and really important. So
Amen.
that's why I'm going to keep talking.
Amen. And me too. I've just absolutely committed to keeping on talking about this. I'm a white parent of a kid of color, and my kid is adopted from China. And a number of kind, well-meaning UUs who have asked, "Where are you from?" Oh, you speak English really well. Thank you. It's my only language. I've lived here my whole life. I mean, it's and you know, for teenagers, they're just not going to stick around for that kind of behavior. I mean, Kenny, you had a lot of stamina there, but you know, Gia right now is just like, to hell with it. I don't need one more racist place to be, you know, and it's all with such good intentions. I mean, it's, you know, nobody is intending, but you know, as one of my teachers said, if you have a car accident and you say to the person, "I didn't mean to hit your car, so don't call insurance because I didn't mean to." You know? They're just not going to say, "Oh, you didn't mean to hit my car." Well, then you're not responsible for the damages.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel like, boy, this incident coupled with, you know, the mass incarceration and all of this, I feel like this national movement is at a really pivotal moment that I am really praying and hoping for religious leaders like the two of you and others to really take leadership, and let's not be quiet right now. Let's just not say, "Oh, we're waiting for the grand jury." Let's be talking all we can, because there's this moment. So I'm curious, Kenny, you invited people in your blog, as it turned into the letter from Peter Morales, to come to an event, and how did it go? And Shauna, you were there too in Denver, is that right?
Yeah.
And so, did everybody wear blue? Was that part of it, or?
No, this was on accident. But yeah, well, so you know, I wrote that blog.
Is that a black thing? Is that, I'm not keeping up? Is that?
Yeah,
Or is that like because you were following the Royals? Like,
Mute him.
I was away for a few minutes. I missed some.
And he's on mute. Okay.
Go San Francisco Giants.
Oh, wow.
Oh man. So yeah, well, you know, when I wrote that piece, I didn't expect, you know, I expected my friends to read it and 30, 35 shares, and it took off beyond that. And, you know, when I got contacted by the Standing on the Side of Love office, because I mentioned at the end, you know, my piece was about sustained action. It was about, you know, that we don't all have the time or resources to go to Ferguson. And as I know Julie Taylor said on the show a couple months ago, that may not be the only way to get involved or even the best way. But, you know, we can show up in our own cities. And one way to do that was yesterday, October 22nd, the National Day Against Police Brutality. Over 60 cities were hosting events, and I was one of the organizers and the MC, one of the MCs for the Denver event. And you know, it was amazing. We had, I guess, about 120 people, maybe 130. 25, 30 of them were Unitarian Universalists. I think it helps in Denver that I'm the organizer and that I'm telling everybody, like, it's cool, I want you there, I'm one of you. But lots of clergy. And really what I heard from people from my congregation who went, and I work in the suburbs, and they came up to the city during rush hour to be there. And what I heard was, you know, hearing stories of family members who have been victims of police brutality. And in one case, there's a guy here, Alex Landau, who is very outspoken, and he was nearly killed himself by police and wanted a big settlement. That when they hear these stories, when they make the effort to show up, to not just read Huffington Post, even though, you know, Meg, you do a great job on there, like, you know, to not just read articles, but actually listen to people who've experienced this. You know, they said, like, I really understand now how important this is, and how even though I, as a white person, I'm not white, but like they were saying, I as a white person, you know, am safe most of the time, this is not the reality for most. And I think it's doing the long, slow work of changing minds. And I suspect if we can make the case as religious leaders that we got to keep showing up at things like this, because there are going to be more Fergusons. You know, I know Barbara knows this. There's going to be more events that happen. If we keep showing up, I think gradually we'll build a movement of UUs who are ready to make some change and ready to show up.
I think it was really important for the event to have white folks. to show that we are part of willing to build a relationship with these communities that are being segregated and cut off, and so much so that they live in a completely different world. And so for us to be there to show that we care, and you know, even if we've read the stories on Huffington Post, as you said, the fact that you're there and you're listening to that mom talk about the son that she lost to police violence. Yep. You are looking her in the eyes, and you can feel that pain. You can't get that from a blog post. You can't just read about it. You have to be there in order to create those relationships and show that you really care. And that's what the rally was really about. I was really moved by Reverend Ford was there, and she gave a very great speech sermon talking about how good do people of color have to be? How perfect do they have to be before they are free from police violence in the way that I, as a white person, experience the police? We were just talking about this before the show, but when I talked to my kids before Ferguson, I was like, if you're in trouble, go to the police. You know, like, if you get lost, go to the police. If you need help, the police are helpful. And then after Ferguson, I realized that's not the conversation that mothers of color with children my age are having. They're having the conversation that just because of the way you look like, you will be persecuted. But you have to know that I love you no matter what, and that you have to watch out for the police, you have to watch out for the schools, you have to be careful, but know that you are beautiful just the way you are. That's the message that they have to give their kids, that I don't have to do that because their whiteness is reflected in every facet of society, that they know that from everywhere else, that they are perfect just the way they are. So really, Ferguson, for me as a parent, it's almost, I mean, it's as devastating as the Newton shootings, where I have to shatter my own sense of security and saying the world is not as what we thought it was. And you as a white person have to take responsibility in that in a way that I wasn't asked to as a kid.
Yeah, and I just want to add into what Shauna said. I mean, it's clear to me that, you know, when I grew up with VUU friends, most of whom are white, you know, I was VUU when I was born, pretty much. And the fact that even in my family, who is well-adjusted and respectable, and, you know, my parents met at law school, for goodness sakes, like, we got different information, you know. It wasn't, you know, we didn't get all police are bad, but it was, you better really be in some trouble, you know, like, I mean, it especially from my mom, you know, very different message than a lot of my peers got. So.
Yeah, one of my blogs was about a colleague of mine whose first memory of any kind is when she's 3. She's out trick-or-treating with her older brother, who's, you know, in charge, 14, and her 5-year-old brother. And the police come, and the 14-year-old wants to get to the houses with a big candy. So they get a little bit far from, this is in Minneapolis, they get a little bit far to bigger houses, and it gets whiter. And suddenly the police pull up, arrest her 14-year-old brother, throw him in the cop car, take him away. She is 3 years old. She and her 5-year-old brother, in their little Halloween costumes with their little pumpkins, are left in a completely, this is her first memory of any kind. And eventually somebody who knew them saw them and got them home. But when she told me that, I thought that memory overlaps, and her dad sat him down and said, after, it turned out some African-American 32-year-old had robbed a convenience store nearby, and they had arrested her or taken her 14-year-old brother in. And her father went and got her brother released, which he was a professor, or he said later he might not have been able to if he hadn't had other privilege to use. But he sat him down and said, think of the police like a rabid dog. Don't move quickly. Don't ever startle them. Don't look them in the eye. And this is her first memory. And after she told me that, I just thought, that is so foundational for her. Everything else is layered on top of that. How can I ever think that I have any sense of what it is like? Because she reads, as so many, you know, as Kenny does, as Aisha does, as Patrice does, is happy, full of life, full of love, full of joy. And so I, you know, presume, oh yeah, because we foundationally rest in this place. And that story just really, I just couldn't let go of it for days, because it made me think the resilience required to still be full of life, full of love, full of joy, in the face of that much resistance every day is something I haven't had to know. And,
well, those parallels continue on today. I mean, everybody on social media has seen the Pumpkin Festival riots, right? Where a bunch of white folks get to turn over cars and light things on fire and smash pumpkins, and the police are like, oh, you know, this is just some youth having some fun, you know. And then when you have the community of Ferguson protesting a teen being killed, they're mobs. They're, you know, it's the same with the New Orleans kind of media perception of, well, who's the looters and who's the survivalist.
Yeah.
What about the open carry thing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're totally right. I mean, and who knows how the Keene police would have reacted if it was a large group of African American kids doing it. And yet at the same time, I also, you know,
we could posit that we know how they would have reacted.
Well, you know, probably, but we can't say it's the exact same thing because it happened in different places and different stuff, and you know, so and yet, like, you know, I agree with you. Yes, it probably would have been much more, you know, Ferguson-like than that. But yeah, and of course the police in Keene, New Hampshire, don't have to really worry about large African American population because that's not what they're dealing with. They're dealing with college students. But still, it's you know, and also they didn't pull out, and maybe they don't have tanks like the St. Louis County Police have, and all, you know, all their other stuff. But
well, we are halfway into our show, so I'm going to take this opportunity to say again, we're the VUU. You can tweet at #TheVUU. You can use the question and answer feature to participate in this conversation. And we are here today with Barbara Hoag Gadon and Kenny Wiley. And Barbara, you've got a story to tell, I think.
Yes, it was about hearing the stories and the impact that it's had on me and other people that I know. It's like these since I haven't had, at least in St. Louis, a lot of friendships with African Americans and being in settings where I'm hearing the stories. Suddenly now, I was invited to a historic African American or an AME church in the city to be part of an interfaith rally. Speakers they specifically wanted a UU there, which I was happy about. And hearing the stories of the people who lived there and how they people who lived in the Canfield apartments and watching the police watch looting happen and not doing anything about it, sitting in their cars, watching police actually forbidding neighbors to help neighbors who are injured, get away from that body or I will shoot you. And then telling those stories and just listening to people's, you know, I did a lot of, I considered it reporting on Facebook, and you know, the responses from some of the white people in, you know, especially people from my hometown, I don't want to pick on them, Anoka, but it was really hard to listen to that and listen to people not believe them, say, oh, hearsay, do air quotes around testimony. And you know, I was at one point, I just said, okay, I have deleted my very first Facebook thread because this is going nowhere fast. And if you do not speak in a civil tone on this in a respectful way, then I'm going to delete your comment. So it's been a really important thing to have to negotiate that, because that means it's real.
I think for me, one of the things that's been making me crazy is the white people open carrying just rifles and machine guns, and a black man walking through a Walmart with a fake BB gun was shot dead. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even covert anymore, the overt racism. It's maddening. And then I understand there's going to be a march in Ferguson of open carry, white people walking through the streets.
It's St. Louis, downtown St. Louis, but still, what a good idea, yeah? I mean,
I hadn't heard that horror story.
I only saw the headline, but it is, the march is planned for St. Louis, downtown St. Louis, rather than Ferguson, but what, I have to read more about it, but how, I just can't imagine with this current climate.
Yeah, so when I was, after I published the blog post and then it got sent out via the Standing on the Side of Love with President Morales's forward, you know, I heard from a lot of people positively. I also heard from a lot of white UUs who were concerned, and I think understandably concerned that, you know, we were coming out on the side of like all cops are bad, all cops are evil or anything like that. And you know, first I want to say that I think it's important to talk about that race in this country is a huge problem, as we, I think, all here agree. It's also different than it was 50 years ago, and I think it's important to lift that up because, you know, I have plenty of good interactions with people. You know, I play ultimate frisbee, which is like the widest sport ever, and you know, I have mostly good interactions. But you know, I think it's important for us to remember that we're talking about systems. And that's what I told people. I mean, my Facebook inbox was flooded, and I told people that we're talking about systems, and so it really, good people in the police department are great, but first of all, why aren't they speaking out? Why aren't they talking to their other officers who are doing bad things? And the other thing is that corrupt systems swallow up good people, and I think it's just important, you know, as I talk to people, and for those who watch this and want to talk to others, it's important to remember that we have to make the case that this is a big thing, that this is about systems, it's less about people, and I just really hope that we can do that because there's clearly a lot in a lot of our congregations, there's a lack of understanding that we still think racism is about individual bigotry, and like, well, I'm a good person, so what do I need to do? I have no responsibility, and that's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, that part about it being individual shows up as people wanting to litigate every specific case. Right? Like, we all had to go through this thing where we analyzed Trayvon Martin, right? And because if you could somehow prove that Trayvon Martin deserved it, then there's not a problem. Well, now we're in the stage where we're like going to individually analyze Mike Brown, because if somehow we prove that Mike Brown deserved it, then it's not a problem. But whatever happens, 3 months from now, there's going to be somebody else, or a month from now, or even tomorrow if people look at it closely. It's not any one situation. It's not an individual thing. It's not Darren Wilson and Michael Brown. It's except as just another one of what's going to happen that's been happening for years, and it's going to continue to happen for years. I was, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about is, you know, back when there was lynching as a common thing, white folks would want to argue about every specific case. Did that person deserve it? Had he really done something awful? Had he, you know, stole a chicken or you know, ogled a white woman or something? You know, like somehow that lynching could come. That at that time, lynching was looked at the way we look at these cases now, of like, well, maybe we have to be fair and look at both sides, and maybe somebody does, you know, I mean, like, oh, maybe we should wait for the process to work. You know, that whole I'm not going to get caught up in any crowd kind of like mentality here, you know, which is really a big UU thing, right? I'm not going to get caught up in any kind of bandwagon, you know, except the bandwagon to benign neutrality and irrelevance, right?
Patrice,
we're all right.
Yeah, we do. So I just discovered that the man who shot the teenager for the loud music, do you remember that?
Yeah, Michael Dunn was his name.
He actually got, I think he got life imprisonment.
Yes.
So to Kenny's point, to the point that, no, it's clearly, it's not, you know, the system doesn't always never work. But, I mean, also to the point that that Kenny brought up, you know, there are cases where black cops are acting just as badly, and of course that you know, that goes to the systemic problems, because that's that internalized racism that then gets fed out in a way that probably frankly shocks even the cops who are involved. You know, there's this sense of not realizing the insidious way in which we all are immersed in the same system, the same culture. You know, and there's not being aware of how that affects everybody.
That's this. You know, once you criminalize a whole population, then everybody treats people of that as being dangerous, which is why, you know, cops who would normally, you know, it's because they're caught in that same worldview that, you know, people out there are, you know, dangerous and need to be controlled with violence. The other thing that, you know Umar Lee, the Muslim cab driver from St. Louis, who writes a great tweet stream, he talks about, you know, the fact that so many cops these days are working with steroids and bodybuilding. He says that the whole population is jacked up and irritable because of that.
Well, so I was talking with one of my best friends, a guy named Razik Brown, who some of y'all know, and is a fellow Black VUU. And we were talking on the phone maybe 2 weeks after Mike Brown was killed, and we were obviously really upset. And we started talking about, you know, imagining us at GA 2015 in Portland, like leading some training and singing with white UUs and having a good time, and then like being out afterwards, have a couple drinks, and just getting involved in some horrible altercation. And, you know, the most controversial part about my blog post came, you know, I talked about that I could be the next Mike Brown as a mid-20s black man. You know, that Razik and I talked about that we get in the wrong situation. It doesn't matter that we worship with white people and, you know, that we're, you know, respected by a lot of white folks and all that, because in the wrong situation, none of that matters. And that was really, really hard to realize for us. But it's something that I know he and I both want people to know, that that's our reality. That, you know, we get in a bad situation and we might not get through it, and it's just hard. It's a hard thing to swallow, but it's the truth.
And I know we had Kate Lohr on, and she was saying that they've been working for years in Portland about the police brutality there. So it's there. You know, I think there's this illusion that some places are really racist. My nice Minneapolis has some of the worst statistics you could ever want to see about racial profiling. Aisha, were you?
Yeah, my husband's a federal law enforcement officer, and so we have interesting conversations here. And I'm the wife of a law enforcement officer who carries a gun and has to be out. And from that point of view, I want him to come home at night. You know, we have 2 children, and so and he is careful in that he understands institutional racism. And to the point that was made earlier about when, you know, law enforcement, the men, women, people are together, it becomes a kind of groupthink, and you really don't see the forest from the trees. So it's not even about good or bad intentions. It's there are rules and there are protocol, and then if you're in a certain situation, you have to do this. And if you're constantly, we talked about this, I think, when not only Kate Lohr, but Julie Taylor was on, when you're in a constant state of fear, you're going to shoot first and ask questions later. And then you, on top of the fear, it's institutional racism. And so it's complex. And I preached about this in August, actually, and in West Side Seattle. And the DRE there, Betsy, said to me, "We have police officers in our congregation, so please don't let this be a police bashing." I said, "My husband's a law enforcement officer. The last thing I'm going to do is bash the police, because this is clearly an institutional problem. So it's bigger than any one person."
Right. Amen.
And people forget the power of groupthink. You can go back in history and read about the Cuban Missile Crisis and see how close we came to nuclear war, and it was put down. A lot of that was put down to groupthink, and luckily somebody was able to break out of that thinking that everybody had, that was driving us toward, getting into a bombing altercation with our neighbor. So it is a powerful, powerful force. And I think there's also that fear the fear of being the one outside of your brothers and sisters and finding yourself in a situation where you need them to have your back and to speak up against that is
well,
very hard.
Well said.
Yeah, it is. But Aisha, as you pointed out, it's also policy. So, I mean, one thing I've learned from Adam Gerhardstein, who's been a guest here, who's now, the first campaign manager for Standing on the Side of Love and now a lawyer, and working in a place where they're litigating against police officers in prisons a lot. And when I was talking to him, I was saying, Adam, I don't get why they're not using tasers. Like, they have these tasers. Why don't they use tasers? And he said, because they have this policy of escalation of force. And so I was like, why don't they shoot at a leg or a hand? Like, what? He said, no, it's an absolute policy that they just shoot for the trunk, and that, and so if that's what you're trained to do, that's what you're going to do so in Cincinnati, where he's from, he said they had a Ferguson about 10 years ago, and they actually have done a lot of healing. But I've been reading about other towns where they've actually moved forward, and I think it's really important to look for some of those models of how to change policy so that people behave differently and let the attitudes follow the behavior change, so.
And I think we have to go to Europe to do that, don't you think? I mean, there are some, I'm thinking Northern Europe, I can't remember which country it was, where for the first time a policeman killed, I want to say Norway, but it might not have been Norwegian. And like the whole country was in mourning.
Iceland, that was Iceland. The entire country turned out.
Yep.
Well, one of the ways that this thing is becoming a national movement is that you're beginning to have national movement demands. Dream Defenders, for example, was putting out some demands even before Ferguson, calling for, just for a Justice Department review of all police shootings, about a national database of all police shootings being, assembled by the Justice Department. That instead of just individually litigating or looking at each particular case, but to begin to look at, well, how do we change the system so that we can see what's going on and can hold people accountable and establish a different norm about what's supposed to happen? Because right now we basically are in a situation where the police do what they do, and we're outside of that. We really can't talk about how and why, but only the result of what happens, which we see.
Well, some of the efforts that's been going on here, that I have a congregant whose daughter is on faculty at I think it's Washington University, but the law departments there actually were trying to change Missouri law about what are the requirements about or what allows a police officer to use lethal force. And currently it is, and I guess not just in Missouri, but currently it is, he or she just has to feel their life is in danger. It's purely their state of mind, and it does not sound like there's any real evidence that you have to put out there that it actually was in danger, that you were. And they tried to, they made a big effort to suggestions for changing in that law, and that was the biggest thing that they were looking at. But they were also looking, and I don't know what alternative they put in, but they also put in something about, and we need to have gender inclusive language. And so they got back, the legislature got back and said, well, we'll change the gender inclusive language. That's it. So frustration, but my hope is that with this kind of, hopefully this pressure that we can be part of, that we can keep coming at that.
Were there specific demands and an agenda at the rally in Denver yesterday for moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've gotten involved in a couple different coalitions, and there's a lot of people working here. And the big thing is to push for a process by which there's accountability, that police are accountable to somebody. What Barbara mentioned is really important because right now they're really not. They're investigated by themselves, or in some cases, people who have really close ties to them. So there is a push, and right now it's very grassroots, and it could take years. But I'm part of a team that's working for civilian oversight, and so this rally was also to highlight that ongoing work. And the great thing about rallies is they get publicity, and you get people in. And so yeah, this is not just about protesting, but about long-term creating change. And why I hope that particularly white Unitarian Universalists listen to stories is that a lot of us are politically motivated, are socially motivated, and there are a lot of UUs who could be of great service. Maybe they don't want to be on the front lines of a protest, but they could be of amazing service to help change policy, to help that long, slow work. Because a lot of it is stuff like Barbara mentioned, that if we can change these really messed up rules that you just say, I fear for my life, and that's it. If we can change that, that is what really will make the difference. And I hope white UUs get involved in that. And it starts with listening to those stories.
Well, I wonder, I think Barbara alluded to this earlier, that there have been leaks of the report of the autopsy report, Michael Brown, and it got me wondering how folks are preparing for either the grand jury to come back and not indict. There's going to be, I think there's going to be significant anger if that happens, and I just wondered if there's any forward planning now, given these so-called leaks, which are looking awfully coordinated to a bunch of us.
I know. Well, I can answer some of that. That was the phone call that some of us were on yesterday, and so St. Louis clergy are getting together in different groups. Metro Congregations United has been really good with this and helping give opportunity, but really coming together, and we're looking. I mean, they've jacked us around. Excuse me, I'm on TV, but with the dates on this. So as late as January 7th to, and of course I had to say, I'm from Minnesota. You do not scare me. I will stick it out here, but. Anyways, they as late as January 7th to then it was October, and then it was November, and right now the best we're thinking is sometime between Election Day and Thanksgiving. We're likely to hear something, especially with the leaks coming out now that we're being prepared, so to speak, and so. Some of the things are, it's what we said earlier is how are we going to show up? How are we going to have people show up? If we are expecting there to be some violence, what kind of preparation, what kind of skills do we need out there? And so people with skills with trauma, people with skills with de-escalating, and also especially standing between, and people are out there doing this right now. Chaplains are out there, clergy of all different faiths, standing between police and youth on the street, just saying, the expression I heard was, we have to protect their rage. We have to protect them and protect this rage to be expressed, and that's going to be a big piece of it. But it's and then just the day of the announcement, like I said, vigils, and we're asking people to be, and that's why I'm encouraged that we've had this this stuff of or these recent protests against police brutality, because we're going to be seeing this, and frankly for my congregation, and I think for other people, it's going to be harder because it's going to be messier. There's going to be more of an inclination to say, ooh, this is too scary. I can't. You know, we have to really be preparing ourselves for that.
And I think we have to not believe the media who tells us how scary, you know, I mean, let's face it, we are the thugs we're being warned about in many cases.
In many cases, but there is going to be some...
I'm not saying there isn't, but I just, when I'm at an event and then I see the media coverage of the event over and over, I just go, it is just completely racist. And
yeah, and the thing that Rosemary was pointing out the other day, Rosemary Bray McNatt was saying that, you know, remembering to keep bringing it up that we're not hearing about how police are escalating this violence. We're only hearing about it coming from these bad protesters.
Yeah, that's the violence I'm scared about. Kenny, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I think a key question here is that I hope UUs are able to ask themselves, as you know, if it comes out that there's no indictment as we're expecting, you know, is the question to ask is, who are you trusting? And if you are putting trust in the institutions, the police and the media, who, you know, feel it worthy to just parrot out whatever police say, that a lot of us, and this is where the conversation was 30, 40 minutes ago, a lot of us aren't afforded the luxury of trusting those sources, especially with these leaks that even our own Justice Department found troubling, as Eric Holder said last night. And so if we're just saying, well, you know, didn't find enough evidence, well, there were 6 eyewitnesses that weren't identical but were similar. So, and the other point I wanted to make is that, you know, I think rioting, looting, it scares us. And I think, you know, I believe that there have been some great commentary going back to MLK about rioting, that, you know, that yes, we're peaceful people and UUs tend to be a peaceful people, but we have to remember that peace, just expecting people who are really upset to not express that rage, is really unreasonable. And to suppress that without listening, without understanding, without being on the ground and saying, I hear you, I think there's a better way to express this. If we don't do that work, then we're really just participating in that culture of silence and telling them, shut up, what you are upset about isn't worthy. And I think we can do better that, and I hope the broader country can do better than that. But I know that our people of faith can do that, and I hope we do.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, we are opinion leaders. Most Unitarian Universalists are, in their own communities, composed of large numbers of opinion leaders. I know here in Ann Arbor, you know, people look to various members of our congregation as people that they listen to and trust, and so we have to use that power. You know, we may not influence, you know, the average listener of Fox News, but we do influence a lot of other people.
And I hope that we can call on our legacy of questioning authority. I mean, that's a lot of us have that history in one form or another, and as a movement we do. And I hope that in this case we can do that, even when race is involved and racism and supremacy are involved, that we can keep doing that.
Well, and what I hope we can do too is that recognize that we do have that power in our communities, because what I kind of see you use is to cut off anybody who doesn't agree with me. I'm never speaking to family members anymore. I'm never going to shop at Walmart again. I'm never going to do this because they are not ideologically pure. And I think it's going to have to take some discomfort on our part to go to those places, because that's where the majority opinion is being formed, and stay at the table and listen to the fear of other white people and what they've been told by the media, and listen to them too and say, I know what you've heard, but I'm here because I care about you, and I want you to know that the world is changing, and you've got to move along with it.
And I think the other thing too that's important for us. I mean, I know many of us who are on this panel grew up as Unitarian Universalists, and it's something that we experience a lot. Is that people who come to our churches don't often come because they like everything. They come because they were attracted to our church for one reason. You know, our sexual stuff, for, you know, the OWL program, or because they could get married in our church, all these sort of things, and that we have to constantly, you know, teach them about all this other stuff, sort of remind them of all the values that we have that are important, and in some ways it gets tiring, you know, and I think that our young people often get I think one of the reasons why our young people don't like stick around our churches is that they come back as young adults, and they kind of go, why is that woman wearing a fur coat? Doesn't she know that, like, all this other stuff? And they don't know that that woman came because this is where we did her son's funeral. No one else would do it in town, that sort of thing. But it's a reminder for me. I'm sitting here going like, of course I know that you can't like always trust the cops, and I have to remind myself like, oh right. It's an important thing that we have to educate everyone. Bring folks along all the time.
Well, it's been quite an hour, and we're so far from done with what we need to say. I'm delighted that everybody here is using your voice in all the ways that you are, and that I think the leadership will emerge in ways that we may not be able to predict right now within our movement, but I am 100% committed to its emergence, as I know everyone here is. And
can I say one thing?
You can have the last word, Patrice.
Okay, it's very short, so you probably will want to have the last word. But I just want to say, Kenny, we are your people.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, I'm yours too.
We are your people.
Amen.
Amen.
It's been clear in what I've heard that a lot of UUs want to get involved, are getting involved, and I hope that continues.
Yep.
Amen.
Amen.
For that. Thanks for coming. See you next week. Next week, I forget what we're doing. Anyone remember?
I think we're dying
church
well
recipe
next
books.
week.
We're talking about church recipe books, folks. It's great.
I think we're dying well next week.
Next week, Daniel DeBona is coming, a longtime hospice chaplain, to talk about, it's around All Saints Day, All Souls Day, talk about dying well. So all kinds of grief in the world, but see you next time.
Ciao.
Bye, folks. Bye.
Bye.